November in Chicago has a specific kind of cruelty. The cold seeps through cheap fabric like it's got a personal vendetta, and tonight, the rain came down in sheets thick as curtains. I pushed through the revolving door of the Mercer building at exactly 11:03, my back screaming from 6 straight hours bent over toilets and tile floors that hadn't seen proper care in months. Before today's shift, I'd already put in 8 hours at a different location. Double shifts were becoming normal, not exceptional, and my body kept a running tally of every repeated motion, every chemical burn, every moment my knees pressed against unforgiving ceramic. Chloe sat in the lobby's corner chair, the one by the dying plant that security never watered. Her homework was spread across her lap, math problems I knew she'd finished hours ago. She looked up when I approached, and I saw it immediately. That expression kids get when they're trying to be older than they are, trying to not complain about waiting in a corporate lobby while their mother scrubbed other people's messes. She was 12, but carried herself like someone who'd learned early that childhood was a luxury we couldn't afford. "Ready?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She gathered her papers without comment, stuffing them into a backpack that was 2 years old and showing it. The zipper stuck halfway, same as it had for months. I kept meaning to replace it, kept adding it to a mental list of things I'd buy when we had extra money. That list was getting long. We stepped outside and the rain hit us like a physical thing. I'd left my umbrella in the supply closet at the first building I'd cleaned today, 7 hours and a lifetime ago. Chloe pulled her hood up, pressing close to my side as we started down the sidewalk toward the bus stop 3 blocks away. The streets were mostly empty at this hour, just the occasional cab spraying water onto the curb and a few people hurrying between the warm glow of bar doorways. That's when I saw her. An older woman stood beneath the overhang of a closed boutique, her silver hair plastered to her head despite the slight protection from the rain. She wore a cream-colored coat that would have been elegant if it wasn't soaked through, and she clutched a small purse against her chest, like it contained something precious. Her eyes moved across the street with a kind of unfocused confusion I recognized instantly. My grandmother had looked like that near the end, before she passed. That lost quality, like the world had shifted while she wasn't looking, and nothing lined up quite right anymore. The woman stepped toward the curb as a taxi approached, waving her hand weakly. The cab didn't even slow down. She tried again with the next one, and the next, but they passed her by like she was invisible. Maybe it was the late hour. Maybe it was the neighborhood. Maybe it was something else entirely. Chicago taxi drivers develop a sixth sense about fares, and whatever they were sensing here made them keep driving. "Mom?" Chloe said quietly, following my gaze. "I know, baby. We should have kept walking. We had exactly $47 in my checking account until Friday's paycheck deposited, and that money was already allocated. 20 for groceries, the bare minimum. 18 for the electric bill that was past due. 9 for the bus passes that would get us through the week. Everything calculated down to the dollar, because that's what you do when there's no margin for error. But Chloe was already moving toward the woman, and I was already following her because we'd both been lost before, and we both remembered what it felt like. "Excuse me?" I said, approaching carefully. Old people could be unpredictable, especially when they were disoriented. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" The woman turned to me and her eyes were a warm brown that reminded me of honey in sunlight. She said something in Italian, rapid and worried, gesturing at the street, and then at a piece of paper she pulled from her coat pocket. The paper was damp, the ink bleeding slightly, but I could make out an address written in careful script. Lakeshore Drive, one of the buildings where people paid more for a parking space than I paid in monthly rent. "I don't speak Italian," I said gently, "but I can see you're trying to get home. These drivers aren't stopping for you." She shook her head, frustrated with herself, and tried again in heavily accented English. "Taxi. I need taxi. Home. My son. He worry." "Okay," I said, glancing at Chloe. "We'll help you get a taxi, all right? We'll make sure the driver knows where to take you." The next 15 minutes were an exercise in futility. 7 cabs passed us. 7. I stepped into the street, waving my arms, using every trick I'd learned from years of trying to get rides in bad weather and worse neighborhoods. Nothing worked. The woman was shivering now, and I could see she was fading, her confusion deepening as the cold and stress took their toll. "This is ridiculous," Chloe muttered. And before I could stop her, she'd stepped off the curb and directly into the path of an approaching taxi. The driver hit the brakes, honking, and my heart stopped completely until I saw my daughter was safe, standing with her hand on the cab's door handle. "Chloe, we need this cab," she called back, already opening the door. "Ma'am, come on. Get in before he changes his mind." I helped the woman into the back seat, her movements slow and uncertain. Chloe leaned in, speaking to the driver through the partition. "She needs to go to this address. It's on Lakeshore Drive. She's confused and she's been out here a long time, so please make sure she gets inside the building safely, okay? Don't just drop her at the curb." The driver, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, looked at the address and then at the woman. "That's a $30 fare from here." I didn't have $30. I had $47 total, and exactly 0 of it was available for taxi rides. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but Chloe was faster. "Here," she said, and I watched in slow-motion horror as my daughter pulled 2 crumpled $10 bills from her jacket pocket. The money I'd given her yesterday for her school trip's pizza lunch next week. "Take this as a deposit. The lady's son will pay you the rest when you get her home. He's rich, okay? Just look at her coat. That's real wool." The driver hesitated, looking between the money and the woman, who was now murmuring something in Italian and patting Chloe's hand. Finally, he took the bills. "All right, but if nobody's there to pay, this doesn't cover the whole trip." "Someone will be there," Chloe said with absolute certainty. "Please drive carefully. She's somebody's mother." The woman caught Chloe's hand before she could pull away from the window. Her eyes had cleared slightly, focused now in a way they hadn't been before. She spoke in Italian again, a long stream of words I couldn't understand but could feel the weight of. Gratitude, concern, blessing, all of it compressed into syllables that rose and fell like music. Then she pressed something into Chloe's palm. A small card, laminated and worn at the edges. Through the rain-spattered window, I could just make out the image of a saint, though I didn't know which one. The woman tapped the card, then tapped Chloe's heart, then her own. She said something else, softer now. And the taxi pulled away from the curb, red taillights disappearing into the downpour. Chloe stood on the sidewalk, soaked completely through, staring at the card in her hand. I stared at my daughter, a dozen different emotions fighting for dominance. Pride that she'd helped someone who needed it. Fury that she'd given away money we didn't have. Fear about how we'd make it through the week now. Exhaustion that pulled at every muscle and bone. "Chloe Marie Collins," I said, and she flinched at the use of her full name. "That was $20. "I know. That was your lunch money for next week." "I know. We don't have extra money." "You know we don't have extra money." "I know." She looked up at me then, her green eyes so much like mine, wet with rain and something else. But Mom, she was scared, really scared, and nobody would help her. All those taxis just kept going by like she didn't exist. The anger drained out of me all at once, leaving only the exhaustion. I pulled Chloe against my side, both of us shivering in the rain. "You should have asked me first. You would have said no. I would have said we couldn't afford it." "That's the same as no." She pressed her face against my wet jacket. "I'm sorry. I just couldn't leave her there. What if that was Grandma before she died? Wouldn't you want someone to help her?" And there it was, the thing I couldn't argue against because it was true. I would have wanted someone to help my mother when she was lost and frightened in her final months. I would have wanted someone to give a damn that she was a person who mattered, even if she couldn't remember her own address. "Come on," I said quietly. "We need to get home." "The bus?" I checked my phone. No buses were running this late on this route. I did the math in my head again. We could take a taxi ourselves, but that would eat into the grocery money. We could call a rideshare, same problem. Or we could walk the 2 miles to our apartment and save the money for food. It wasn't really a choice. "We're walking," I said, and Chloe didn't complain. The walk home was cold and wet and long. Chloe showed me the card the old woman had given her, turning it over to reveal a phone number written in fading blue ink on the back. "Do you think we should call?" she asked. "And say what?" "Hi, we helped your mom get a taxi. Can we have $20? No, just to make sure she got home okay. I looked at my daughter, at the genuine concern on her face for a stranger she'd never see again. And something in my chest twisted. Maybe tomorrow, I said, when we're dry and can think straight. We reached our apartment building at midnight. The elevator was broken again, so we climbed 4 flights of stairs with water dripping from our clothes and creating a trail on the worn carpet. Inside our 1-bedroom apartment, I turned the heat up slightly, knowing I'd pay for it on the next bill, but not caring. Chloe needed a hot shower and warm pajamas and sleep. While she was in the bathroom, I sat at our tiny kitchen table and looked at the numbers on my phone's calculator app. Took the $20 from the total, redistributed what was left. Groceries would be tighter. We'd eat a lot of rice and beans this week. The electric company would get a partial payment with a promise for the rest next week. The bus passes would have to wait, which meant walking more. It would work. It always worked somehow. Chloe emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her wet hair hanging in dark ropes. Mom? Yeah. Baby? Are you mad? I looked at her. Really looked at her. 12 years old and already learning that kindness came with a price tag. Already calculating whether compassion was worth the cost. Already becoming someone who saw need and responded to it, even when responding hurt. No, I said, and meant it. I'm not mad. I'm proud of you. But Chloe, we have to be smart about these things. We're barely making it as it is. $20 matters to us. It really matters. I know. She came over and hugged me, still damp from the shower. I'll take peanut butter sandwiches for lunch next week. Save the money that way. I held her tighter. This kid who was growing up too fast and handling it with more grace than I probably deserved. Deal. Now get some sleep. School in the morning. After she was in bed, I took my own shower, letting the hot water beat against my sore muscles. I thought about the old woman. Wondered if she'd made it home safely. Thought about Chloe's instinctive kindness and whether I was raising her right or raising her foolish. Thought about the $20 and the million other calculations I'd make before Friday's paycheck. Brought a brief moment of breathing room. Tomorrow would come, and I'd clean more toilets and empty more trash cans and scrub more floors. Chloe would go to school and eat her peanut butter sandwich and not complain. We'd keep going because that's what we did. We kept going. I dried off and climbed into bed next to Chloe. Our apartment was a 1-bedroom, but she'd insisted I take the bed while she took the pull-out couch. I'd insisted back that we'd share the bed. It was big enough, and the heating worked better in the bedroom anyway. She was already asleep, curled on her side with one hand tucked under the pillow. On the nightstand, the saint's prayer card sat face up, the number on the back barely visible in the dim light from the street. Tomorrow, maybe, I'd call that number. Make sure the old woman was all right. Maybe her son would offer to reimburse us, and maybe he wouldn't. Either way, we'd survive. We always did. 3 days passed before anything changed. 3 days of the same routine. Wake up at 5, get Chloe ready for school, take the bus to the first cleaning job, work until noon, grab something cheap for lunch, head to the second location, work until 11, pick up Chloe from whatever friend's house she'd camped out at doing homework, go home, sleep, repeat. The $20 we'd given away had created exactly the ripple effect I'd predicted. We ate rice and eggs for dinner 3 nights straight. Chloe took peanut butter sandwiches to school without complaint. I walked an extra mile each way to save bus fare. I didn't call the number on the back of the prayer card. What would I say? The woman had made it home, presumably. The taxi driver had been paid, presumably. Our involvement was over. Wednesday afternoon found me at the Mercer building again, the same place where I'd finished my shift the night we'd helped the old woman. I was scheduled for the executive floors today, which meant better pay, but also meant dealing with the particular kind of mess that came from people who believed their money exempted them from basic courtesy. Coffee rings on mahogany desks, trash overflowing because walking 3 feet to empty it was apparently too much effort, bathrooms that looked like crime scenes. I was on the 42nd floor, scrubbing someone's idea of modern art off a bathroom mirror, when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, purposeful, not the shuffle of an office worker heading home late. Amanda Collins? I turned to find 2 men in dark suits standing in the doorway. Security, based on the earpieces and the way they carried themselves. My stomach dropped. This was it. Someone had complained about the cleaning quality, or I'd been caught using supplies for a different floor, or any one of the 100 small infractions that could get you fired when you were expendable. Yes? I kept my voice steady, setting down the spray bottle carefully. We need you to come with us, please. The please didn't make it sound optional. I thought about arguing, about demanding to know what this was about, but people in my position didn't get to demand things. Am I in trouble? Just come with us, ma'am. I followed them to the elevator, my mind racing through possibilities. Had something happened to Chloe? No, they would have said that immediately. Was this about the old woman? Had something gone wrong? Had the taxi driver filed a complaint? I couldn't imagine what we'd done that warranted security escort, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The elevator went up instead of down. Past the executive floors I'd been cleaning, past the office spaces entirely, all the way to the penthouse level. The doors opened onto a private lobby with actual artwork on the walls, not corporate motivational posters. Real artwork. The kind that probably had price tags with too many zeros. Through here, one of the security guards said, gesturing toward a set of double doors made of dark wood with brass handles. The doors opened into what could only be described as an apartment in the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, the lake visible in the distance even through the gray November afternoon. The furniture was the kind you saw in magazines I'd never be able to afford. Everything was cream and chrome and glass. Expensive in that understated way that only truly wealthy people achieved. And standing by the windows, backlit by the fading daylight, was a man who made the expensive surroundings seem almost ordinary by comparison. He turned when I entered, and I got my first clear look at him. Tall, easily 6'2" or more, with dark hair styled in a way that looked effortless, but probably required a professional. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, no pulling at the shoulders or bunching at the waist. But it was his eyes that caught me. Dark brown, almost black, and currently focused on me with an intensity that made me want to step backward. "Ms. Collins," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "Thank you for coming. I'm Franco Rinaldi." The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it suggested it should. I stayed near the door, very aware of the security guards behind me, very aware that I was alone with a strange man in a place nobody knew I'd been taken to. I didn't really have a choice about coming. Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe. Fair point. "I apologize for the dramatic summons. I needed to speak with you privately, and I wasn't sure you'd agree if I simply asked." "Speak with me about what?" He gestured toward a seating area, leather chairs arranged around a glass coffee table. "Please, sit down. I'd rather stand." My back was already screaming from 8 hours of cleaning, but sitting felt like surrender. "Of course." He didn't move closer, keeping the distance between us. 3 nights ago, you and your daughter helped an elderly woman find a taxi. The woman was my mother, Beatrice Rinaldi. The old woman. I should have known this would come back somehow. Nothing was ever just kindness. There was always a price. "Is she all right? Did something happen?" "She's fine. Thanks to you and your daughter." He paused, and something in his expression softened slightly. "My mother has early-stage Alzheimer's. She gets confused sometimes, disoriented. That night, she'd slipped away from her caregiver during an appointment. We'd been looking for her for 2 hours. I'm glad she made it home safely. Because of your daughter's quick thinking and generosity." He moved slightly, not toward me, but toward a desk near the window. "The taxi driver contacted us. Security footage from several buildings helped us trace the route back to where you'd been working. It took a few days, but we found you. Of course they had cameras. Of course they'd tracked us down. I felt exposed, like I'd been watched without knowing it. Look, if this is about the money, we don't want repayment. Chloe did that because she wanted to help, not because she expected anything back. I know." He picked up something from the desk, a leather wallet. "But I'd still like to give you this." He approached slowly, giving me time to move away if I wanted to, and held out several bills. I didn't take them. Didn't even look to see how much it was. "We don't want your money, Mr. Rinaldi. It's just the $20 your daughter spent. plus compensation for your time and trouble. We weren't troubled, and our time was freely given. I crossed my arms, a defensive gesture I couldn't help. If your mother is safe, and you wanted to say thank you, considerate said. I need to get back to work. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable sensation of being evaluated. Not in a threatening way, exactly, but like he was trying to solve an equation, and I was the variable that didn't fit. You're refusing? I'm refusing. Most people would take the money. I'm not most people. The words came out sharper than I intended, and I don't like being summoned by security guards and brought to mysterious penthouses. So if we're done here, I'd really like to go. We're not quite done. He returned the wallet to the desk, and when he turned back, his expression had changed. Less businessman, more something I couldn't quite read. My mother has been asking about your daughter, about Chloe. She remembers very little from that night, but she remembers a kind girl who helped her. She wants to thank her properly. You already thanked us. I thanked you. She'd like to thank Chloe herself. He paused. My mother doesn't have many good days anymore. The confusion is getting worse. But she's been clear about this. Insistent even. Would you consider bringing Chloe to meet her? Just for a short visit. Somewhere public if that makes you more comfortable. A cafe, perhaps. I thought about saying no. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to get away from this man and his money and his mysterious penthouse and his security guards. But then I thought about Chloe, who'd stood in the rain and given away her lunch money for a stranger. I thought about the old woman, scared and confused, pressing that prayer card into my daughter's hand. Where? I asked finally. There's an Italian cafe in Lincoln Park, Cafe Fortunata. Saturday afternoon, 2 o'clock. I need your phone number. A direct line, not some office number. If I'm bringing my daughter anywhere, I need to know I can reach you. He pulled out a phone, typed something, and my own phone buzzed in my pocket. A text with just a phone number, no name. That's my personal cell. Only a handful of people have it. You can reach me anytime. I looked at the number on my screen, then at him. Saturday at 2. We'll stay for 1 hour, and then we're leaving whether your mother is done thanking us or not. Understood. And Mr. Rinaldi, if this turns out to be something other than what you're saying, if there's any kind of weird situation, I'm walking out and I'm calling the police. I don't care how many security guards you have. That earned me an actual smile. Brief but genuine. I would expect nothing less. Your daughter is lucky to have a mother who's protective. My daughter is all I have, which means I don't take chances with her safety. I understand completely. He walked me to the door, keeping that careful distance. Saturday at 2. I'll make sure my mother is having a good day. The security guards escorted me back to the 42nd floor in silence. One of them handed me my cleaning supplies, which apparently they'd collected while I was upstairs, and then they were gone. I stood in the empty hallway, my hands shaking slightly, trying to process what had just happened. That night, after Chloe was asleep, I did what any rational person would do. I Googled Franco Rinaldi. The results were interesting in what they didn't say as much as what they did. His name appeared in connection with an import-export business called Rinaldi International. There were photos of him at charity events, always in an expensive suit, often with older men who had that same aura of controlled power. A few articles mentioned his business interests in shipping and logistics. And then there were the other results, the ones that made my stomach tighten. Online forums speculating about his connections. A 2-year-old article from a tabloid suggesting links between Rinaldi International and organized crime figures, though no charges had ever been filed. A Reddit thread that got deleted but still showed up in cached searches, people discussing whether he was Maid or just associated. I stared at my phone screen for a long time, weighing what I'd learned against what I'd observed. The man I'd met today had been polite, controlled, respectful of my boundaries. He'd also had me brought to a private penthouse by security guards and admitted to tracking us down through surveillance footage. Those weren't the actions of someone who played by normal rules, but his mother had Alzheimer's. She'd been lost and scared, and we'd helped her. That part, at least, felt true. I deleted my search history and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about Franco Rinaldi's dark eyes, the way he'd looked at me when I refused his money. Surprise, yes. but also something else. Respect, maybe, or at least recognition that I wasn't going to be easy to manage. Saturday would come, and we'd meet his mother, and then this strange chapter would close. We'd go back to our normal life of double shifts and tight budgets and rice for dinner. The Rinaldis would fade back into their world of penthouses and private security, and we'd stay in ours. That was what I told myself anyway. I wanted to believe it was true. Saturday arrived with unexpected sunshine, the kind of bright November day that felt like a gift after weeks of gray rain. I'd dressed Chloe carefully that morning, debating between her 2 pairs of decent jeans before settling on the darker ones without the frayed hem. She wore a burgundy sweater I'd found at Goodwill last month, still with the original tag somehow. For myself, I'd chosen black pants and a cream-colored blouse, both clean and pressed, but showing their age in ways only someone looking closely would notice. Café Fortunata sat on a tree-lined street in Lincoln Park, the kind of neighborhood where people walked expensive dogs and pushed $1,000 strollers. The cafe itself had an old-world charm, with dark wood trim and windows that looked out onto the sidewalk. Through the glass, I could see white tablecloths and fresh flowers in small vases. "Mom, are you nervous?" Chloe asked as we approached the entrance. "A little," I admitted. No point lying to her. She'd always been able to read me too well. Me too. What if she doesn't remember me? Then we'll remind her gently. And we'll be patient. I squeezed her hand. "Just be yourself, baby." That's all anyone can ask. Franco Rinaldi stood as we entered, and I spotted him immediately despite the cafe being half full with the lunch crowd. He wore dark slacks and a gray sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But I pushed that thought away. He wasn't alone. An elderly woman sat across from him, her silver hair styled in an elegant twist, wearing a lavender cardigan over a white blouse. Even seated, I could see she carried herself with a certain grace. "Ms. Collins, Chloe," Franco said, moving to greet us. "Thank you for coming. This is my mother, Beatrice." The older woman looked up, and her face transformed completely. Her eyes, the same warm brown I remembered from that rainy night, lit up with recognition. She stood with surprising quickness and moved directly to Chloe, pulling my daughter into an embrace that made me instinctively step closer, protective. But Chloe relaxed into the hug, and Beatrice was murmuring in Italian, words I couldn't understand, but that sounded like blessings or prayers. When she finally released Chloe, there were tears in her eyes. "The kind girl," she said in heavily accented English. "You help me. You are good girl. I'm glad you got home safely," Chloe said, and I felt a surge of pride at her composure. Sit. Beatrice gestured to the table, and Franco pulled out chairs for us. The whole thing felt surreal. 3 days ago I'd been scrubbing toilets in an office building, and now I was sitting at a white tablecloth cafe with a woman who probably never worried about grocery money. A waiter appeared immediately, and Franco ordered in rapid Italian. I caught words here and there, enough to know he was ordering for all of us without asking what we wanted, but somehow it didn't feel presumptuous. More like he was taking care of details so we could focus on his mother. Beatrice reached across the table and took Chloe's hands in both of hers. "I have something for you," she said, and Franco produced a wrapped package from the seat beside him. The paper was beautiful, cream-colored with a silk ribbon. Beatrice pushed it toward Chloe. "For you, please." Chloe looked at me and I nodded permission. She unwrapped it carefully, preserving the paper in that way kids do when they're not used to receiving many gifts. Inside was a book, old and clearly valuable, with a leather cover embossed with gold lettering. "Italian Fairy Tales," the spine read. "This was mine when I am young girl in Napoli," Beatrice said. "My mother, she read to me. Now you have. You read. Remember, Beatrice." "I can't take this," Chloe said softly, looking at the book with wonder. "It's too valuable. You must take," Beatrice insisted. "Please, make me happy." I met Franco's eyes over the table. He gave a slight nod, and I understood. This mattered to his mother. Fighting it would only upset her. "Thank you," Chloe said, holding the book like it was made of glass. "I'll take really good care of it. I promise." The food arrived, pasta dishes that smelled incredible and looked like works of art. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten in a restaurant that didn't have a drive-through window. Franco served his mother first, cutting her pasta into smaller pieces without making it obvious, guiding her hand to her fork when she seemed confused about where to start. I watched the way he interacted with her. Patient, gentle, never rushing. When she repeated the same question twice within 5 minutes, asking where we were and why we were there, he answered both times as if hearing it for the first time. When she called him by what must have been his father's name, he gently corrected her without frustration. "Tell me about school," Beatrice said to Chloe, her English coming and going in waves. "You study? You are smart, girl?" "I like school," Chloe said. "My favorite subject is English. We're reading To Kill a Mockingbird right now." "Ah, books. Books are important." Beatrice turned to Franco. "Luca, you remember? I read you every night when small?" "I remember, Mama," Franco said, not correcting the name this time. "You read me Italian stories, about the clever fox and the foolish wolf." Yes. The fox, he is too smart. Always winning." She smiled, pleased, then seemed to lose the thread. Her gaze drifted to the window, confusion creeping back in. Franco caught my eye, and there was something in his expression that hit me unexpectedly. Grief, but also acceptance. He knew she was slipping away, day by day, and he was handling it with more grace than I probably would have managed. Chloe filled the silence by asking Beatrice about Italy, and the older woman came back to herself, describing Napoli with vivid detail. The ocean, the markets, the way her mother made ragu that simmered all day. Franco translated when she slipped fully into Italian, and Chloe listened with genuine interest, asking questions that kept Beatrice engaged and present. My daughter had always been good with elderly people. She'd spent time with my mother before she passed, never impatient with the repetition or the slow pace. Watching her now with Beatrice, I saw that same natural empathy, that ability to meet someone where they were without judgment. The lunch stretched past an hour, past the time I'd said we'd leave. Nobody seemed to be counting minutes. Franco ordered coffee and pastries, and Beatrice showed Chloe pictures on her phone, photos from decades ago that she narrated with surprising clarity. Then she'd forget what she was saying mid-sentence, and Franco would gently redirect, bringing her back without making her feel lost. Finally, Beatrice excused herself to use the restroom, and Franco's assistant, who I hadn't even noticed was sitting at a nearby table, got up to accompany her. It was just Franco, Chloe, and me at the table. "Your mother is wonderful," Chloe said. "I'm really glad we came. She's having a good day today," Franco replied. "You've given her that. Both of you have. She seems happy," I said carefully. "But I can see it's difficult. The Alzheimer's. It's getting worse." He said it matter-of-factly. No self-pity. She has a full-time caregiver, a nurse named Patricia who's excellent at medical care. But my mother needs more than medical management. She needs companionship, conversation, someone who engages with her as a person, not just a patient. I saw where this was going, and tensed immediately. "Mr. Rinaldi..." "Franco, please." "Franco, if you're about to offer me money again..." "Not money. A job." He leaned back slightly, giving me space. "I need someone to spend time with my mother. 5 afternoons a week, roughly 3 to 8. Someone to talk with her, maybe cook together, watch old movies, take walks in the garden." Patricia handles all the medical aspects, medication management, physical therapy, but Mama needs what Patricia can't provide. She needs someone who sees her, not her condition. "You have resources," I said. "You could hire a professional companion, someone trained in memory care. I've tried 3 different companions in the past year. They were all qualified, experienced, appropriate. My mother tolerated them, but never connected with them. The way she connected with Chloe in 10 minutes, I haven't seen that in months." Chloe was watching this exchange with interest, smart enough to stay quiet, but clearly following every word. "What exactly would this job entail?" I asked, already feeling myself being pulled into something I wasn't sure I wanted. "Spending time with my mother at our family home. Reading, talking, simple activities that keep her engaged. Chloe would be welcome to come with you after school. In fact, I think my mother would prefer it." He named a figure for the weekly salary, and I had to work to keep my expression neutral. That was 3 times what I made working double shifts as a cleaner. 3 times. That's too much, I said automatically. It's market rate for private companion care, for someone with professional training and certification. I clean buildings for a living. I'm not qualified for this. You're more qualified than anyone I've interviewed. You have patience, compassion, and genuine kindness. That's what my mother needs. That's what I saw in how you raised your daughter. He paused. This isn't charity, Ms. Collins. This is me trying to provide the best care possible for my mother in her remaining good years. You'd be doing me a service, not the other way around. I wanted to say no. Every instinct told me this was too much too fast, that there had to be strings attached, that people like Franco Rinaldi didn't make generous offers without expecting something in return. But I also did the math in my head. That salary would mean no more double shifts. It would mean Chloe could do after-school activities instead of sitting in office lobbies waiting for me. It would mean we could afford an apartment with heat that worked consistently and a refrigerator that didn't sound like it was dying. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. Take whatever time you need. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is the address of the family home where my mother lives. When you're ready, call me and I'll arrange a tour. You can see the environment, meet Patricia, ask whatever questions you need answered. Beatrice returned then, looking tired but content. She hugged Chloe goodbye, pressing a kiss to her forehead and murmuring more Italian blessings. Then, surprisingly, she turned to me and took my hands. You are good, mother, she said in English that was suddenly much clearer, as if she'd summoned all her focus for this moment. I see how you protect her, how you love her. My Franco, he is good son, but he work too much. He worry too much. He need someone who see past the business, past the money. He need kind person. Like you. Mrs. Rinaldi. Beatrice. You call me Beatrice. She squeezed my hands. You think about his offer. Not for money. For him. He carry too much alone. Then the clarity faded from her eyes, and she looked confused again, asking Franco where they'd park the car. Walking back to the bus stop with Chloe, I felt the weight of the decision pressing on me. My daughter was quiet, holding the book of fairy tales against her chest like treasure. What do you think? I finally asked. I think she's lonely, Chloe said. And I think Mr. Rinaldi really loves his mother. You could see it in how he was with her. He never got frustrated or impatient, even when she repeated herself. That's not what I asked. I know. She was quiet for another block. I think you should do it if you want to. I liked Beatrice. I wouldn't mind spending time with her after school. And Mom, you work so hard. If this job pays what he said, you wouldn't have to work so many hours. We could maybe do things together sometimes, like normal families. Normal families. The words hit harder than they should have. That week, I thought about Franco's offer constantly. Ran through every possible scenario. The money would change our lives, yes. But was I walking into something I didn't understand? Franco Rinaldi wasn't just a successful businessman. The internet had made that clear. There were implications to working for him. Connections that might put us in proximity to things better avoided. But I also thought about Beatrice's clear moment, about the genuine affection in her eyes when she'd looked at Chloe. I thought about Franco's patience with his mother, the care he'd taken to make her comfortable. Whatever else he might be, he was a devoted son. The question wasn't whether we needed the money. We did, desperately. The question was whether I was willing to enter the orbit of Franco Rinaldi's world, with all its unknowns and implications. Whether the security that money provided was worth the risk of whatever complications might come with it. By Friday, I still hadn't decided, but I had the business card in my wallet, and I'd looked at it approximately 100 times. The address written on the back was in Forest Glen, where houses had actual yards and people lived in single-family homes instead of apartments with thin walls. I'd call him Monday, I decided. I'd at least see the house, meet the nurse, understand fully what was being offered. Then I'd make a decision. That was reasonable. That was smart. What I didn't know yet was that Monday's phone call would set in motion a chain of events that would reshape everything I thought I knew about safety, security, and the complicated nature of good men who operated in dark spaces. Monday morning, I called Franco Rinaldi and accepted the job on a trial basis. 1 month, I told him. After that, we'd both evaluate whether it was working. He agreed without hesitation, and by Wednesday afternoon, I was standing in the foyer of a house in Forest Glen that made our apartment look like a closet. The Rinaldi home wasn't ostentatious in the way I'd expected. No gold fixtures or marble statues or whatever wealthy people filled their houses with. Instead, it was elegant and understated, with high ceilings and large windows that let in natural light. Hardwood floors gleamed under Persian rugs that were probably older than I was. Family photographs lined the hallway, black and white images of people who shared Franco's strong features and Beatrice's warm eyes. Patricia, the nurse Franco had mentioned, met me at the door. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands, wearing scrubs and an air of professional competence. She walked me through Beatrice's daily routine, medication schedule, physical therapy exercises, and the warning signs of particularly bad confusion episodes. The key with Alzheimer's patients is maintaining consistency, Patricia explained as we toured the first floor. Same routines, same spaces, minimal disruption. When they get agitated, you redirect gently. Never argue about what's real or not real to them. I understand. My grandmother had dementia before she passed. Patricia's expression softened. Then you know. The person you love is still in there, but they're fading. Some days you get glimpses of who they were. Other days, they're completely lost. She paused at a doorway. Mrs. Rinaldi is having a good morning today. She's been asking about the girl who helped her. Your daughter, yes? Chloe. She'll come after school lets out at 3:30. Perfect. Having young energy around helps. Mrs. Rinaldi responds well to children. Less complicated than adults, I think. Patricia pushed open the door to reveal a sunroom filled with plants and comfortable furniture. Beatrice sat in a chair by the window, a book open in her lap, though I could see she wasn't reading it. The first 2 weeks established a rhythm that felt almost comfortable. I'd arrive at 3, and Patricia would brief me on how Beatrice's day had been. Good days meant she was alert, conversational, present. Bad days meant confusion, agitation, sometimes not recognizing her own home. I learned quickly that the best approach was meeting her wherever she was mentally, not trying to force her back to reality. We'd read together, mostly Italian poetry that she'd memorized decades ago, and could still recite with startling accuracy. We'd cook simple meals, her hands remembering the motions even when her mind couldn't recall the recipe names. We'd walk through the private garden behind the house, a space carefully maintained with paths wide enough for a wheelchair, if it eventually came to that. Chloe would arrive with her backpack full of homework, settling at the kitchen table, while Beatrice watched her with contentment. My daughter had a gift for engaging the older woman without making her feel patronized. She'd ask about Italy, about Beatrice's childhood, and listen to the stories that sometimes changed in the telling, but were always delivered with passion. Franco himself was present, but peripheral those first weeks. He'd appear briefly in the evening, checking on his mother, exchanging pleasantries with me, but always maintaining a professional distance. He worked long hours, Patricia told me. Often didn't come home until late, sometimes not at all. The business demanded his constant attention. I noticed other things too, details that confirmed the suspicions I'd developed after researching Franco online. The property had security I hadn't immediately recognized because it was subtle. Cameras hidden in landscaping. Men in casual clothes who I realized were guards after seeing them multiple times in different positions. The study where Franco worked had reinforced doors, and once when I passed by during a meeting, I'd heard raised voices speaking rapid Italian that sounded more like threats than negotiations. Beatrice would sometimes murmur worries about the dangerous business her son was involved in. She'd clutch my hand and say things in Italian that I didn't understand, but felt in my gut were pleas for his safety. I'd comfort her without really knowing what I was comforting her about, redirecting to safer topics like recipes or garden plans. The third week, everything shifted. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unseasonably warm for late November. Beatrice and I had been looking through old photo albums, her narrating stories about relatives long dead, when suddenly her face went blank. Complete confusion washed over her features, and she stood abruptly, knocking the album to the floor. "Where am I?" she asked in Italian-accented English, her voice rising with panic. "This is not my house. Where is my mother? I want my mother." "Beatrice, you're home. You're safe." I kept my voice calm, standing slowly so I wouldn't startle her. "No, no. This is not right. Nothing is right." She backed away from me, her eyes unfocused. "Who are you? Where is Franco? Where is my husband?" Her husband had been dead for 15 years, Franco had told me. But to Beatrice right now, he was alive, and she needed him. "Let's sit down," I said gently, not approaching but gesturing to the couch. "You're tired. Sometimes when we're tired, things get confusing." "I am not confused." The agitation was escalating, and I knew from my grandmother's decline that this could spiral quickly into full panic if I didn't redirect. I started singing, an old Italian lullaby my grandmother used to hum, though I didn't know the words, just the melody. Something about it reached Beatrice through the confusion. She stopped, backing away, her head tilting as if trying to place the sound. "My mother sang that," she whispered. "Did she? It's beautiful. Will you teach me the words?" The panic receded from her eyes, replaced by the distant look of someone reaching into memories that were clearer than the present. She sat down slowly, and I sat beside her, still humming. She began singing the actual lyrics, her voice wavering but growing stronger as the familiar words came back to her. That's how Franco found us 20 minutes later. His mother singing an Italian lullaby while I held her hand, both of us rocking slightly to the rhythm. He stood in the doorway, and I saw something cross his face that I hadn't seen before. Raw vulnerability, quickly controlled, but there nonetheless. After Beatrice had calmed completely, and Patricia had taken her upstairs for a nap, Franco asked me to stay for a moment. We stood in the kitchen, afternoon light slanting through the windows, and he looked exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. "Patricia told me what happened," he said. "How you handled it. That technique, singing to redirect her. Most people wouldn't think of that. My grandmother responded well to music when the confusion got bad. Even when she couldn't remember her own name, she could remember songs from her childhood. The brain holds on to those memories differently. You've dealt with this before. It wasn't a question. My grandmother lived with us her last year. My mother took care of her while working 2 jobs. I was 15, helped where I could. I leaned against the counter, suddenly aware of how informal this conversation was compared to our previous interactions. It's hard, watching someone disappear piece by piece. Some days they're themselves and you almost forget. Other days they're gone completely, and you're caring for a stranger who has their face. "Yes," he said it quietly, like I'd articulated something he'd been feeling but hadn't voiced. "Exactly that. The other caregivers, they were competent. They followed protocols, administered medication correctly, kept her on schedule. But they treated her like a patient, not a person. You treat her like she still matters, even when she can't remember why she should. She does matter. She's your mother. She raised you, loved you, shaped who you became. That doesn't disappear just because her memory does." Franco was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying me with that same intensity I'd noticed at our first meeting. The previous caregivers would have called Patricia immediately, maybe called me in a panic. "You handled it yourself. That's what you hired me for, isn't it? I hired you because my mother connected with your daughter. I kept you on because you're good at this. Better than anyone else I've interviewed." He moved to the coffee maker, and I realized this was the longest conversation we'd had since I'd started working here. "Coffee?" "Sure." He poured 2 cups with practiced efficiency, handed me one. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, drinking coffee in a kitchen that probably cost more than most people's houses. It should have felt strange, but somehow it didn't. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. "Of course. The business you run. The import-export company. That's not all it is it?" He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "No, it's not all it is. I'm not asking for details. I just need to know if working here, bringing Chloe here, puts us in danger. Real danger, not theoretical. The property is secure. More secure than most government buildings." Nothing that happens in my business life touches this house. I've made sure of that. He met my eyes directly. But I won't lie to you, Amanda. There are risks associated with being in my orbit, even peripherally. If you want to leave, I understand. I'll pay you through the end of the month regardless. I should have taken the out he was offering. Should have grabbed Chloe and gone back to our safe, predictable life of poverty and struggle. But I thought about Beatrice singing that lullaby, about Chloe's face when she talked about spending afternoons here, about the paycheck that had already allowed me to buy groceries without calculating every penny. I'm not leaving, I said, but I need you to be straight with me. If something changes, if the risk level increases, you tell me immediately. No protecting me from information I need to keep my daughter safe. Agreed. He extended his hand and I shook it. His grip was firm, his hand warm. Thank you for staying. My mother needs you. More than I realized when I made the offer. After that conversation, something shifted between us. Franco started staying later in the evenings, long after Beatrice had gone to bed, and Chloe was doing homework at the kitchen table. He'd pour wine, and we'd talk. Not about his business or my past, but about smaller things. Books, music, places we'd traveled or wanted to travel. He listened more than he talked, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested in my answers, not just making conversation. I was careful not to read too much into it. He was lonely, probably, isolated by his position and the nature of his work. I was someone safe to talk to, an employee, but also someone who'd proven trustworthy. That was all it was. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't aware of him. The way he moved through spaces like he owned them, which he usually did. The rare smile that transformed his face from intimidating to almost boyish. The gentleness he showed his mother contrasted sharply with the controlled power I saw when he was handling business calls. Chloe noticed too. Mr. Rinaldi talks to you a lot, she observed one evening as we drove home. He's my employer. We discuss his mother's care. Mom, I'm 12, not stupid. He talks to you the way people talk when they like each other. Not just boss-employee stuff. You're reading too much into it, baby, if you say so. But her tone suggested she didn't believe me. I didn't entirely believe me either. But acknowledging attraction to Franco Rinaldi felt dangerous for reasons that had nothing to do with his criminal connections. I'd been down the road of getting involved with someone who seemed strong and protective, only to discover too late that protection could become control. I wasn't doing that again, no matter how many times Franco's eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. 4 weeks into the job, I'd settled into a routine that felt almost normal. Chloe was thriving. I was sleeping better, knowing we had financial stability, and Beatrice had more good days than bad. It was the closest thing to peace I'd felt in years. I should have known it wouldn't last. The 6th week started like all the others. Chloe caught the school bus at 7:15. I arrived at the Rinaldi house by 3, and Beatrice was having what Patricia called a moderate day. Not her best, not her worst. She recognized me immediately, but kept calling me by her sister's name, Lucia, no matter how many times I gently corrected her. My phone buzzed during afternoon tea. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Amanda. The voice sent ice through my veins. Ryan. My ex-husband, who should have been in prison for another 8 months on an aggravated assault charge. Surprised to hear from me? I stepped away from Beatrice, moving into the hallway where she couldn't hear. How did you get this number? I got out early. Good behavior, overcrowding, you know how it goes. And I've been thinking a lot about my daughter, about my rights as a father. You signed away visitation rights in the divorce, under duress. My lawyer says I have grounds to contest. Parental alienation, they call it. You've been keeping Chloe from me, poisoning her against her own father. His voice had that edge I remembered, the one that came right before things got bad. I want to see her. I have a right to see her. You lost that right when you put me in the hospital. That's your version. Mine's different. And a judge might be real interested in hearing both sides, especially now that you're working for some rich guy. What's that about, Amanda? You sleeping with your boss? That's not a good environment for a child. My hand tightened on the phone. Stay away from us, Ryan. Or what? You gonna call the cops? Tell them what? That I called my ex-wife to discuss custody of my daughter? That's not illegal, sweetheart. But you keeping her from me? That could be. He paused, and I could hear him breathing. I'll be in touch. Real soon. The line went dead. I stood in the hallway, my heart hammering, trying to control the panic rising in my chest. Ryan was out. Ryan knew where I worked, or at least knew enough to find me. Ryan was going to make good on his threats, because that's what he did. He found your weak spots and pressed until you broke. I didn't tell Franco. This was my problem, not his. I'd handled Ryan before. I'd handle him again. I researched restraining orders on my phone that night after Chloe fell asleep, filled out the paperwork online, and submitted it to the court. The process could take weeks, the website warned. File a police report first, it suggested. But what would I report? An unwanted phone call wasn't a crime. The messages started the next day. Text after text, each one more aggressive than the last. I know where Chloe goes to school. Bet that fancy boss of yours doesn't know about your past. Maybe I should tell him. You can't hide from me. You're still my wife in the eyes of God. That little brat needs her father. I'm coming to get her. I blocked his number. He texted from a different one. I blocked that. He called from payphones, from other people's phones, always finding a way through. I stopped sleeping, jumping at every sound, checking the locks on our apartment door obsessively. Chloe noticed. Mom, you're acting weird. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, baby. Just tired. You keep checking your phone like you're waiting for bad news. I'm not. I promise. The lie tasted bitter. But what was I supposed to say? Your father, who terrified you for years, is out of prison and threatening us? She'd just gotten to a place where she felt safe. I couldn't take that away from her. On Thursday, Ryan showed up at our old apartment building. I'd moved us 6 months before I took the job with Franco, but he must have started his search there. Mrs. Alvarez from 3B called me, her voice shaking. Amanda, there's a man here asking about you and Chloe. He's being very aggressive, demanding to know where you moved. I didn't tell him anything, but he's scaring people. Call the police, Mrs. Alvarez. Tell them he's trespassing and harassing residents. I did. They came, talked to him, but they said he hasn't broken any laws. He left, but Amanda, he said he'd be back. That night, I pulled Chloe out of her school and enrolled her in a different one across town. The paperwork was a nightmare. The commute would be terrible, but at least Ryan wouldn't know where to find her during the day. I told her it was because the new school had a better arts program. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. Friday afternoon at the Rinaldi house, I was helping Beatrice with a puzzle when Franco came home early. Unusual for him. He typically didn't appear until after 7. He took one look at me, and his expression shifted. Amanda, can we talk? Privately. Patricia took over with Beatrice, and I followed Franco to his study. The room was all dark wood and leather, with a massive desk that probably weighed more than my car. He gestured to a chair, but I stayed standing, too wound up to sit. What's wrong? He asked directly. Nothing. Everything's fine with your mother. She's had a good week overall. I'm not asking about my mother. I'm asking about you. You've been jumpy, distracted. You've lost weight. Chloe told Patricia you changed her school suddenly. Something's wrong. Of course Chloe had mentioned it. Why wouldn't she? It's personal. Nothing that affects my work here. Amanda. He said my name with unexpected gentleness. I'm not asking as your employer. I'm asking as someone who's concerned about your well-being. What's going on? I wanted to keep it to myself, handle it alone like I'd handled everything else in my life. But I was exhausted, scared, and running out of options. And maybe it was the way he was looking at me, without pity or judgment, just genuine concern. Maybe it was remembering the listener feedback about not being defensive when someone offered help. Or maybe I was just tired of carrying everything myself. My ex-husband got out of prison early, I said. He's been contacting me, making threats about taking Chloe. He showed up at my old building. He knows where she went to school. I've filed for a restraining order, but the process is slow. And until then, there's not much the police can do unless he actually does something. Franco's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. What kind of threats? that he's going to take her from me, that he'll contest the custody arrangement, that I'm an unfit mother for working here. I wrapped my arms around myself. Ryan is very good at finding legal gray areas. He terrorized me for 3 years, but he never left marks where people could see. No arrest record except the one assault charge that stuck because a neighbor called 911. He knows how to make my life hell without technically breaking laws. Has he threatened physical violence? Not explicitly. He's smarter than that. Just implications. Intimidation. I met Franco's eyes. Look, I'm telling you this because you asked, but I don't expect you to do anything. This is my problem. I'll handle it. How? I don't know yet, but I will. Franco was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him thinking, calculating. When he spoke, his voice was calm. I know a family law attorney, one of the best in Chicago. He owes me a favor. I'll have him contact you today. Get the restraining order expedited. Review your custody agreement. Make sure everything is airtight legally. I can't afford. You're not paying. I am. And before you argue, consider that this is also about protecting my mother. If your ex is unstable enough to show up at your old building making threats, he's unstable enough to follow you here. That puts Beatrice at risk, which makes it my problem too. He was giving me an out, a way to accept help without feeling like charity. I recognized the tactic and was grateful for it. Thank you. I appreciate the attorney contact. There's something else. He moved around the desk, leaning against it casually. The guest house on the property is empty. It's fully furnished, has its own entrance, complete privacy. You and Chloe could stay there temporarily until the legal situation is resolved. The property has security, your apartment building doesn't. Franco, that's too much. It's practical. You're already here 5 days a week anyway. This would eliminate your commute, save you time and gas money. Chloe could do her homework here instead of that long bus ride to the new school, and frankly, my mother would love having her around more. I'm not moving into your house. The guest house is separate from the main house. You'd have your own space, your own life. You'd just be on secure property. He paused. Amanda, I'm not trying to control you or make you dependent on me. I'm offering a resource I have that could help keep you and your daughter safe. That's all. I thought about our apartment with its flimsy locks and no security, about Ryan knowing my patterns, my routines, about Chloe's scared face when I'd made her change schools without explanation, just until the restraining order comes through. I said finally, and I'm paying you rent. You're not. Yes, I am. I won't be a charity case, Franco. Either I pay rent or I don't stay, those are the terms. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You're stubborn. I'm practical. I've learned the hard way that free things always have strings attached. Fair enough. We'll work out reasonable rent. He pulled out his phone, texted someone. My attorney will call you within the hour. His name is Vincent Moretti. Tell him everything about Ryan, every threat, every incident. Don't minimize or leave things out because you think they're not important. Okay. And Amanda? Thank you for trusting me with this. I know it wasn't easy. He was right. It wasn't easy. But standing there in his study, seeing genuine concern in his eyes, rather than the will to control I'd gotten used to from Ryan, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, but a small reduction in the weight I'd been carrying alone. Vincent Moretti called 45 minutes later. He was brisk, efficient, and asked questions that made it clear he dealt with situations like mine regularly. By the end of the conversation, he'd already drafted the restraining order with language that would make it harder for Ryan to fight, scheduled an emergency hearing for Monday morning, and sent over paperwork for me to sign digitally. Mr. Rinaldi takes care of people he values, Moretti said before hanging up. You're in good hands. That weekend, I packed up our apartment. Franco sent people to help. 2 quiet men who carried boxes and furniture with practiced efficiency and never asked personal questions. The guest house was smaller than I'd expected, which somehow made it less intimidating. 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a small kitchen and living area. Furnished simply but comfortably, with large windows overlooking the garden. Chloe loved it immediately. Mom, there's actual space here. And look, you can see the lake from my bedroom window. It's temporary, I reminded her. Just until things settle down with your father. Her expression closed off at the mention of Ryan. I don't want to see him. I know, baby. You won't have to. Promise? I wanted to promise. Wanted to guarantee her safety with absolute certainty. But I'd learned not to make promises I might not be able to keep. I'm going to do everything I can to keep you safe. That's what I can promise. Monday morning's hearing went better than expected. Ryan didn't show up, which Moretti said was typical for bullies who relied on intimidation rather than legal standing. The judge granted a temporary restraining order with a hearing scheduled for a permanent one in 2 weeks. Ryan was legally barred from contacting me or Chloe, from coming within 500 feet of us, from interfering with her school or my work. This should hold him, Moretti said as we left the courthouse. But keep documenting everything. Every violation, every attempted contact. If he breaks this order, he goes back to prison, and he knows it. I should have felt relieved. I should have gone back to the Rinaldi house and relaxed, knowing we had legal protection. But I'd lived with Ryan's threats long enough to know paper didn't stop determined men. I was right to be cautious. Tuesday night at 2 a.m., I woke to pounding on the guest house door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of aggressive, violent hammering that meant someone wanted to break through, not be let in. Amanda, Ryan's voice slurred and furious. Open this door. You can't keep me from my daughter. I have rights. I grabbed my phone, pulled Chloe from her bed where she'd woken up crying, and locked us in the bathroom. My hands shook as I dialed 911, gave them the address, told them my ex-husband was violating a restraining order. Amanda! More pounding, harder now. The sound of something hitting the door, maybe his shoulder. I know you're in there. You think you're safe with your rich boyfriend? You think he can protect you? I'll kill you both before I let you take my daughter. Then I heard other voices. Male, authoritative, not Ryan's. The pounding stopped, shouting but farther away. Chloe was sobbing against my shoulder, and I held her tighter, listening for any sound that would tell me what was happening. My phone rang. Franco's name on the screen. Are you all right? He asked immediately. We're locked in the bathroom. What's happening? Security has your ex-husband contained. Police are on their way. Stay where you are until I come get you. 5 minutes later, there was a gentle knock. Amanda, it's me. It's safe. I opened the bathroom door. Franco stood in the guest house living room, and through the still open front door, I could see 2 security guards restraining Ryan on the ground. My ex-husband was screaming threats, fighting against the holds, his face purple with rage. Police arrived and took over. Ryan was arrested for violating the restraining order, for criminal trespass, for making terroristic threats. The officers collected statements from me, from the security guards, from Franco. One of them looked at the door Ryan had been attacking and shook his head. Another few minutes, he would have gotten through. Lucky you had security nearby. After everyone left, after Chloe finally cried herself into exhausted sleep in her bedroom with me lying beside her, Franco knocked quietly on the guest house door. Can we talk? He asked. We sat on the small couch in the living room, and I realized I was shaking. Delayed reaction, probably. Adrenaline crash. How did your security know? I asked. I had them monitoring this building specifically. After you told me about Ryan, I couldn't just do nothing. The property is secure, but I wanted to make sure someone was close if he tried anything. You were watching us. I was protecting you. He said it simply, without apology. There's a difference. I should have been angry about the invasion of privacy. Should have felt controlled or manipulated, but all I felt was grateful that someone had been paying attention. That when Ryan came for us, we hadn't been alone. Thank you, I said quietly, for everything. The attorney, the guest house, the security, for caring about what happens to us. Amanda, he shifted slightly closer. You and Chloe aren't just employees to me anymore. I hope you know that. I did know that. Had known it for weeks, maybe longer, the way he looked at me during our late-night conversations, the care he took with Chloe, the fact that he'd quietly arranged protection without demanding credit or making me feel weak for needing it. Ryan is going back to prison, I said. Moretti called while you were dealing with the police. Violating the restraining order plus the threats are enough to revoke his early release. He'll serve out the rest of his original sentence plus additional time. Good. So we won't need to stay here much longer. Once everything is settled legally, we can go back to our apartment." Franco was quiet for a moment. "You could stay, if you wanted to. Not because you need protection or because I'm your employer. Just because you wanted to be here." "Franco, I'm not asking for anything, Amanda. I'm just saying the option exists, for as long as you want it." He stood, giving me space. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day with statements and paperwork. I'll handle whatever you need me to handle." After he left, I sat in the dark living room, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 6 weeks. How my life had transformed from desperate survival to something approaching stability. How Franco Rinaldi had gone from intimidating stranger to someone I trusted with my daughter's safety. How dangerous that trust felt, and how necessary it had become. After Ryan's arrest, I told Franco we'd stay in the guest house for another week, maybe 2, just until the court proceedings were finalized. That was the plan. Temporary shelter, temporary security, temporary everything. I was good at temporary. I'd built my entire adult life on temporary solutions that somehow became permanent through sheer force of necessity. But staying in the guest house changed things in ways I hadn't anticipated. For the first time in years, Chloe and I had space to breathe. The apartment we'd left behind had been cramped, with thin walls that let us hear every argument from the neighbors, every footstep from above. Here, silence wrapped around us like a blanket. Chloe had her own room with windows that actually opened, with a closet big enough to hold all her clothes and books without everything piling on top of everything else. She was sleeping through the night again. I'd catch her reading in bed with a contented expression I hadn't seen since before the divorce, before Ryan's threats had turned our lives into a constant state of alert. The weight she'd been carrying, the premature adulthood that came from having a mother who worked too much and worried constantly, it was lifting. She laughed more, made jokes, started talking about maybe joining the school art club next semester. I told myself not to get comfortable. This wasn't our life. It was borrowed space in someone else's world, but comfort crept in anyway. Subtle and insidious. The way I stopped calculating grocery costs because the kitchen was fully stocked and Franco had made it clear we were welcome to anything. The way Chloe's homework grades improved because she had a quiet desk and proper lighting instead of working at our apartment's kitchen table under a flickering bulb. The way I slept deeper, knowing there were security cameras and guards, and reinforced doors between us and whatever threats existed in the outside world. My routine with Beatrice continued unchanged during the days. She was having more bad days than good lately, Patricia noted with clinical concern. The progression was accelerating. Some afternoons she didn't recognize me at all, calling me by names of people from her childhood in Naples. Other times she'd look at me with perfect clarity and say things that hit like punches. "You are good for my Franco," she told me one lucid afternoon while we folded laundry together. "He is different when you are here. Less alone. You understand? Mrs. Rinaldi. Beatrice. How many times I tell you. Beatrice." She set down the towel she'd been folding and took my hands. "My son, he carry heavy weight. The family business, it is not easy. Dangerous. But he do it because his father ask him. Because the family need him. He sacrifice much. Too much." Her eyes held mine with unexpected intensity. "You and your daughter. You give him something he not have before. Hope, maybe. Or just reason to come home at night instead of staying in that cold office." I didn't know how to respond to that. Franco and I had settled into a pattern over the past weeks. He'd finish working around 8 or 9, long after Beatrice had gone to bed, and he'd find me in the guest house kitchen or living room. We'd talk, sometimes about nothing important, just the kind of meandering conversation that happens between people who've grown comfortable with each other, sometimes about deeper things. His frustrations with business partners who lacked vision, my memories of Chloe as a toddler before life got complicated, books we'd both read, places we'd like to travel if circumstances were different. He never touched me beyond the occasional brush of hands when passing a wine glass or the brief contact of shoulders when we both leaned against the kitchen counter. But there was awareness between us, a current of something unspoken that made those casual touches feel weighted with possibility. I was attracted to him. That was undeniable and probably foolish. He was my employer. He was involved in criminal enterprises I couldn't fully comprehend, and I had a daughter to think about. Getting involved with Franco Rinaldi in any capacity beyond professional would be spectacularly stupid, but I thought about him more than I should. The way his expression softened when he talked to his mother. The careful control he maintained in every interaction, like he was constantly monitoring himself for signs of the violence I knew he was capable of, but had never directed toward me. The rare, full smile that transformed his entire face from intimidating to almost boyish. Chloe noticed, of course. 12-year-olds were unnervingly perceptive. "You like him," she said one evening, after Franco had left the guest house following one of our longer conversations. "He's my employer. Mom, I have eyes. The way you two talk, that's not boss and employee stuff. That's something else. It's complicated." "Is it, though?" She closed her book, giving me her full attention. "He's nice to you. He's nice to me and to his mom. He helped us when Dad was being scary." What's complicated about that? How did I explain to my daughter that nice wasn't the same as safe? That powerful men, even ones who seemed protective, could become controlling? That I'd already made the mistake once of trusting someone who presented well but hid darkness underneath? "I need to be careful," I said finally. "We both do. This isn't our world, baby. We're here temporarily because we needed help, but we can't forget that." "Why not? Why can't this be our world?" She leaned forward, and I saw hope in her expression that terrified me. "We're happy here. You're less stressed. I have space and quiet, and I actually like going to the new school. Mrs. Rinaldi loves having us around. Why do we have to leave? Because nothing is free, Chloe. Everything has a cost, and sometimes you don't see the bill until it's too late to do anything about it. That's just pessimistic adult talk. Sometimes good things happen, and they're just good. They don't have to be complicated." I wanted to believe her, wanted to embrace the simplicity of her worldview. But experience had taught me that good things usually came with conditions, and the better they seemed, the steeper the eventual price. The second week in the guest house, the atmosphere in the main house changed. I felt it before I understood what I was feeling. Security presence increased. Men I'd never seen before appeared on the property, talking in tight clusters with expressions that suggested high stakes. Franco's meeting in his study grew longer and louder, raised voices carrying through walls that were supposed to be soundproof. Patricia pulled me aside Tuesday afternoon. "There's some kind of business situation happening. Mr. Rinaldi asked that you keep Chloe close to the guest house after school. Don't wander the grounds. Just stay in your space or in the main house with Mrs. Rinaldi." "What kind of situation?" "The kind I don't ask about, and you shouldn't either." But she looked worried, and Patricia wasn't someone who worried easily. I should have taken Chloe and left then. Should have recognized the warning signs and removed us from whatever was brewing. But I didn't. Partly because I'd committed to caring for Beatrice and walking out felt like abandoning her. Partly because I told myself this was exactly what Franco had promised wouldn't happen, that his business wouldn't touch us. Mostly because I didn't want to leave, and that wanting scared me more than the nameless threat did. Wednesday night, everything came apart. I was reading to Beatrice in her room, Chloe curled up in the chair by the window with her own book, when the first shots rang out. Sharp cracks that my brain initially didn't process as gunfire because gunfire didn't happen in places like this. In neighborhoods where houses cost millions and people walked expensive dogs. Then came the sound of breaking glass, shouting, more gunfire. Close. Too close. "Get down." Franco's voice commanding, coming from the hallway. He appeared in the doorway, and I'd never seen him like this. Gun in hand, face hard with controlled fury. "Bunker, now. Amanda, bring Chloe and my mother." I didn't argue or ask questions. Grabbed Chloe, who'd gone pale and frozen, and guided Beatrice from her chair. Franco led us down a hallway I'd never noticed before, through a door hidden behind a bookshelf, downstairs that descended into reinforced concrete. The bunker was larger than expected, furnished like a living space with a sofa, supplies, communications equipment. Patricia was already there, checking her medical kit with practiced efficiency. "Stay here," Franco ordered. "Don't open this door for anyone except me or my men. If you hear them say codename Verde, it's safe. Anything else, you assume compromise and you lock down completely. Understood? Franco, I started. Understood? Harder now, brooking no argument. Yes. He looked at Chloe, who was shaking despite her attempts to appear brave. Something crossed his face. Regret, maybe. Then he was gone. The door sealed behind him with a heavy mechanical sound that made my stomach drop. Chloe pressed against my side, and I wrapped my arms around her. Beatrice was confused, agitated, asking questions in Italian that I couldn't answer. Patricia tried to calm her while I held my daughter and listened to gunfire above us. Each shot felt like a physical impact. This was real. This was happening. I'd brought my child into a war zone. The shooting lasted maybe 10 minutes. It felt like hours. Then silence, worse than the noise because silence meant unknown outcomes. Were Franco's people okay? Was Franco okay? Were the attackers contained? Or had they breached the house? 30 minutes later, the intercom crackled. Verde. Medical assistance needed. 2 injured, stable but bleeding. Patricia grabbed her kit and moved to the door. I stood. I'm coming with you. Amanda, I have first aid training. If there are injured people, you might need help. She didn't argue, just unsealed the door. To Chloe, I said, stay here with Beatrice. I'll be right back. Keep the door locked. Mom, right back. I promise. The scene above was controlled chaos. 2 men sat against the wall, one with a shoulder wound, the other with a leg injury. Blood pooled on the expensive hardwood floors. Franco was on his phone, speaking rapid Italian, his free hand gesturing sharply. Security personnel moved through the space, checking windows, securing perimeters. Patricia went to the man with the shoulder wound. I knelt beside the other, pressing clean towels against the leg injury to slow the bleeding. Basic pressure, elevation, keep him talking so he didn't go into shock. Training from a long-ago workplace safety course. Knowledge I'd never expected to use. The man's name was Vincent. He talked me through his military service while I kept pressure on his leg, waiting for the private ambulance Franco had called. His words came in bursts between winces of pain, but he stayed conscious and coherent. That was what mattered. Franco found me 20 minutes later, still kneeling beside Vincent with my hands covered in someone else's blood. The ambulance had taken both injured men. The property was secure again. And Franco stood looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Thank you, he said quietly. Vincent would have been in worse shape if you hadn't helped stabilize him. Is everyone else okay? My people, yes. The attackers retreated when they realized they wouldn't breach our defenses. No fatalities on either side. This time. The words hung between us. I need to get Chloe, I said, standing on shaky legs. She's terrified down there. Wait. He caught my arm gently. Amanda, I need to say something. Not now, Franco. My daughter just survived her second violent incident in 2 weeks. She's in a bunker scared out of her mind, and I need to be with her. I know, but you need to hear this first. He released my arm. I was wrong to bring you here. Wrong to think I could keep you separate from my world. What happened tonight, it could have gone differently. If they'd breached the house, if they'd gotten past security, you and Chloe would have been trapped in that bunker with no escape. I put you in danger, both of you. You warned me there were risks. I chose to stay anyway. You chose based on incomplete information. You didn't know the extent of what you were walking into because I didn't tell you. He ran a hand through his hair, and I realized he was shaken in a way I'd never seen. The Cartel de Sinaloa is pushing into Chicago, trying to take over port operations. My organization controls shipping routes they want. This is a territorial war, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. People will die. Properties will be targeted. And anyone associated with me becomes a potential casualty or leverage point. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve the truth before you decide what comes next. Full truth, not the sanitized version I gave you before. He met my eyes directly. I run operations for one of Chicago's most powerful organized crime families. We control port access, warehouse distribution, protection rackets, and legitimate businesses that launder money. I'm not the head of the family, but I manage day-to-day operations, which makes me a target. Being near me, working for me, living on my property, that puts you and Chloe at risk. Real, serious risk. Tonight proved that. I should have been horrified, should have grabbed Chloe and run, but instead I felt oddly calm, like I'd been waiting for this conversation. And now that it was happening, I knew exactly what I needed to say. I'm not naive, Franco. I researched you before I took this job. I knew there were implications. What I didn't know was the specific nature of the threat, or how imminent it was. That's what I need from you. Complete honesty about risk levels. Not protection from information, but access to it so I can make informed decisions about my daughter's safety. You want to stay? He said it like he couldn't quite believe it. I want to make an informed choice. Tell me what's happening with this cartel. Tell me what security measures are in place. Tell me what the realistic danger level is for Chloe if we stay here versus if we leave. Then I'll decide. So he told me. Everything. The territorial dispute that had been building for months. The negotiations that had failed. The likelihood that violence would escalate before either side backed down. The security protocols he'd implemented. The guards. The surveillance. The reinforced structures. The fact that this property was probably the safest place in Chicago for us. But safe was relative when you were caught in the middle of a gang war. We talked until nearly dawn, long after Chloe had fallen asleep in the bunker with Beatriz and Patricia had taken them both upstairs to bed. We sat in Franco's study with blood still staining his shirt cuffs, and he gave me the unvarnished truth about his life and the world I'd entered by accepting his job offer. When he finished, I was quiet for a long time, processing, calculating, weighing known dangers against unknown ones. I need 2 things from you, I said finally. First, if the situation escalates to a point where Chloe's safety can't be guaranteed even with all your security, you tell me immediately. No downplaying, no protecting me from harsh realities. I need to know the moment we need to leave. Agreed. And second, if we stay, you stop treating us like fragile things that might break. We're not decorative additions to your life. We're people who've survived difficult circumstances and know how to handle ourselves. Stop trying to shield us from everything. Just give us information and trust us to make our own choices. He nodded slowly. I can do that. But Amanda, you should know something else. What? This thing between us. Whatever it's becoming. That complicates everything. You're not just my mother's caregiver anymore. You're someone I care about. Someone I want to protect. Which makes you more vulnerable, not less. People who want to hurt me will see you as a pressure point. Is that why you've been keeping your distance? The careful boundaries? Yes, and because I didn't want to take advantage of your situation. You needed this job. You needed the security. Starting something personal when you might have felt obligated or trapped. That would have been wrong. I don't feel trapped, I said. I feel like I'm finally making choices instead of just reacting to circumstances. That includes choosing to stay despite the risks. And Franco? That includes choosing to acknowledge that there's something between us worth exploring when the timing is better. Something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or hope, when the timing is better. First, we deal with the cartel situation. Then we figure out the rest. That could take months. Then we wait months. I'm good at waiting. I've been doing it most of my life. Waiting for things to get better, waiting for the next crisis to pass, waiting for a moment to catch my breath. What's a few more months? He stood, came around the desk, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he took my blood-stained hands in his and said, "Thank you, for staying, for trusting me enough to hear the truth, for not running when most people would have. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we see if I made the right choice." But sitting there in the pre-dawn quiet, my hands in his, I knew I'd already made my choice. Right or wrong, I was staying. Not because I was trapped or afraid or had nowhere else to go, but because for the first time in longer than I could remember, I'd found something worth fighting for. Not just safety or security or financial stability, but belonging. A place where Chloe could flourish, where Beatriz had people who genuinely loved her, where Franco could be something other than the cold, controlled operator his position demanded. Maybe that made me foolish. Maybe I'd regret it. But I'd spent too many years playing it safe, accepting scraps, settling for less. If there was even a chance at something more, something real, I was willing to risk the complications. The days following the attack moved like frames in slow motion, each moment heavy with unspoken decisions. I kept expecting the reality of what had happened to hit me all at once, some delayed panic that would send me running with Chloe toward the nearest exit. Instead, what I felt was a strange clarity, the kind that comes when you've run out of energy to lie to yourself. Franco gave me space, not the cold, dismissive kind of space, but the intentional distance of someone who understood that pressure right now would shatter whatever fragile trust we'd built. He worked longer hours, stayed in his study past midnight, and when we did cross paths in the main house while I was with Beatrice, he was polite, professional, careful not to assume anything. Chloe was the one who forced the conversation I'd been avoiding. It was Tuesday evening, 5 days after the attack. We sat at the small kitchen table in the guest house, picking at takeout neither of us had much appetite for. She'd been quiet all day, withdrawn in a way that set off every maternal alarm I had. "We should talk about what happened," I said finally, setting down my fork. "You mean the shooting?" She didn't look up from her plate. "What's there to talk about? Bad people tried to hurt Franco. His security stopped them. We hid in a bunker. Everyone's fine now." "That's the factual summary, yes. But how do you feel about it?" She was quiet for a long moment, pushing rice around her plate in aimless patterns. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than usual. "I was really scared. Like, more scared than when Dad showed up that night. Because at least with Dad, I knew what he wanted. With the shooting, I didn't understand what was happening or why. I know, baby. I was terrified too. But you didn't act like it. You went upstairs after to help those hurt guys. You had blood on your hands." She looked at me then, and there were tears gathering in her eyes. "Mom, are we safe here? Like, really safe? Because it feels like maybe we're not. And everyone's just pretending we are." That was the question, wasn't it? The one I'd been wrestling with since Franco had sealed us in that bunker and disappeared to handle whatever violence was happening above us. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Franco says this property is more secure than most places we could go. The attack was repelled quickly. Nobody got seriously hurt. But you're right that there's danger here. Real danger. Not the kind you can completely plan for or prevent. So why are we staying? Because I'm trying to figure out if the danger here is worse than the danger out there. If we leave, we go back to struggling. Back to me working constantly and you being alone too much. Back to worrying about money and whether our locks are good enough, and if my ex-husband will find some new way to make our lives hell." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "Here, at least, the danger is acknowledged. Franco doesn't pretend his world is safe. He just offers the best protection he can provide, and lets us decide if that's worth it. Do you trust him?" I thought about that. I trust that he's been honest with me about who he is and what his life involves. I trust that he genuinely cares about his mother and about us. I trust that when he says he'll protect us, he means it, and has the resources to try. But Chloe, trust isn't all or nothing. It's measured, conditional. I trust Franco within the context of understanding who he is and what he's capable of. She processed that, her 12-year-old mind working through complexities that kids shouldn't have to consider. Mrs. Rinaldi really likes having us here. She's been so much happier since we started coming around. And Franco, he's different when you're in the room. Less scary, more normal. That doesn't mean we owe them our safety. I know, but it also means we matter to them. They're not just being nice because they feel sorry for us. They actually care. She squeezed my hand. "I think we should stay. But I also think you need to stop pretending you don't have feelings for Franco. It's obvious, Mom, to everyone except maybe you two. It's complicated. Adults always say that when they're scared to do something." She pulled her hand back, picking up her fork again. "Just promise me that if it ever gets too dangerous, we'll leave. Even if it's hard. Even if we don't want to. I promise." 2 days later, Franco knocked on the guest house door just after 9 in the evening. I'd sent Chloe to bed an hour earlier, though I knew she was still awake reading under the covers. I opened the door to find him looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. The kind of exhaustion that went bone deep. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Of course. Come in." He stepped inside, and for a moment just stood there, like he was gathering his thoughts or his courage. Finally, he said, "The situation with the cartel has been resolved, temporarily at least. We reached an agreement with neutral mediators. Territory stays divided as it was. Both sides pull back from aggressive posturing, and we revisit the arrangement in 6 months. That's good, isn't it? It's a reprieve. Whether it holds depends on whether both sides honor the terms." He moved to the couch, sitting heavily. "But it means the immediate threat level has dropped significantly. You and Chloe are safer now than you were last week." I sat beside him, leaving careful space between us. "You look exhausted." "I haven't slept much since the attack. Too many things to handle. Too many people to keep in line." He rubbed his face. "Amanda, I need to say something, and I need you to really hear it. Okay, I was wrong to bring you here. Wrong to think I could keep you separate from my world. What happened last week proved that. If they'd gotten past security, if things had gone differently, you and Chloe could have been killed. That's on me. I put you in danger by offering you this job, by suggesting you stay in the guest house, by letting you get close to my family. Franco, let me finish." His voice was steady but strained. "I'm offering you a way out. A real one. I have a property in Portland, Oregon. A house, fully furnished, in a safe neighborhood with good schools. I can set you up there with enough money to live comfortably for years while you figure out what you want to do. Clean break, fresh start, away from all of this." I stared at him, processing what he was offering. "You'd just let us go? I'd help you go. Make sure you had everything you needed to build a stable life somewhere far from the complications of being associated with me." He turned to look at me directly. "Because that's what you deserve, Amanda. Stability, safety, a chance for Chloe to grow up without worrying about gunfire. I can't give you that here. All I can offer here is expensive security wrapped around constant danger. Is this what you want? For us to leave?" His jaw tightened. "What I want is irrelevant. This is about what's right, what's best for you and your daughter." "Don't do that," I said sharply. "Don't decide for me what's best. Don't make this sacrifice play and pretend it's nobility. If you want us gone, say that. If you're scared of what's happening between us and you're looking for an easy exit, say that. But don't dress it up as concern for my well-being. I'm not—" "Yes, you are. You're making this choice for me instead of giving me the information and letting me decide. Just like you did in the beginning, trying to throw money at me instead of asking what I actually needed." I stood, pacing to the window. I've spent too many years with someone who made all my decisions for me, who decided what I could wear, where I could go, who I could talk to, all in the name of love or protection or whatever justification he was using that day. I'm not doing that again, Franco. Not even with someone whose intentions are better. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm trying to protect you, but I'm doing it the wrong way. So do it the right way. Give me the full picture. Tell me what staying here really looks like. Not the sanitized version. Not the reassuring corporate speak. The actual truth." He stood, running a hand through his hair. "The truth is that my life is complicated and dangerous. The cartel situation is resolved for now, but there will be other conflicts, other threats. I run operations for a family that controls significant criminal enterprises in this city. Shipping, distribution, protection, money laundering through legitimate businesses. I'm not the head of the organization, but I'm high enough up that I'm a target. People who want to hurt the family will look at anyone close to me as leverage or as a way to send a message. I already know all this, but do you understand what it means long-term? It means always having security around. It means vetting everyone who comes into your life. It means Chloe growing up in a world where she has to be careful what she says and to whom. It means compromising your values because the person you care about does things that are illegal and sometimes violent." He moved closer, his expression intense. "It means accepting that I'm not a good man, Amanda. I've hurt people. I've made decisions that cost lives. I'll do it again if I have to. if that's what protects my family or my mother or you. I know what you are, I said quietly. I'm not naive enough to think you're some misunderstood hero. You operate in dark spaces, you do terrible things, and you've made peace with that, because it's the world you were born into and the responsibility you accepted. I see all of that. And you're still considering staying? I'm considering it because you've also been honest with me, because you've never pretended to be something you're not, because when I needed help, you offered it without conditions, because you love your mother with a gentleness that contradicts everything else about your life, because you've shown me that power doesn't have to mean abuse, that protection doesn't have to become control. I closed the distance between us. I'm not looking for a white knight, Franco. I'm looking for a partner who sees me as an equal, who respects my choices even when he disagrees with them, and who's willing to be honest about his flaws instead of hiding them behind charm. I can't promise you safety. Nobody can. Ryan was supposed to be safe. He had a regular job, paid taxes, went to church on Sundays. He still put me in the hospital. At least with you, I know the risks going in. I can't promise I won't hurt you. Maybe not physically, but this life, what I do, it takes a toll on everyone close to me. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Together. If we decide to try this. Separately. If we realize it's not working. I reached up, touching his face gently. Stop trying to make this decision for me. Tell me what you want, and then let me tell you what I want, and we'll figure out if those two things can coexist. He covered my hand with his, leaning into the touch. I want you to stay. I want to come home to you and Chloe, instead of an empty house. I want to watch my mother's face light up when you walk in the room. I want to have conversations at 2 a.m. that make me forget about everything else for a while. I want to see where this goes between us, even though I know I have no right to ask for it. Why do you think you have no right? Because of who I am. What I do. The danger I represent. Franco, I'm a single mother who barely finished high school, who spent the last several years cleaning toilets to survive, who picked an abusive husband and stayed too long. I'm not some prize you don't deserve. I'm a regular person with a complicated past, and a kid who depends on me making smart choices. If anything, you should be questioning whether I'm worth the complications I bring. You're worth every complication, he said immediately. You and Chloe both. You're the first real thing I've had in my life in longer than I can remember. Everything else is transactions and power plays and carefully managed relationships. With you, I can just be myself. Flawed, tired, carrying too much weight. But myself, I kissed him. Not the tentative testing of the waters kind of kiss, but the kind that said I'd already made my decision and I wasn't interested in second-guessing it. He responded immediately, his arms coming around me, pulling me closer. It felt right in a way I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Like finding something I didn't know I'd been looking for. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, I said, I'm staying. Chloe and I are staying. Not because we're trapped or afraid or have nowhere else to go. We're staying because we choose this. We choose you and your mother, and this complicated, dangerous, honest life you're offering. But we're staying with conditions. Name them. First, if the danger escalates to a point where even you think we should leave, you tell me immediately. No heroic attempts to handle it alone first. We're partners in this decision. Agreed. Second, you don't keep things from me to protect my feelings. I need to know what's happening in your world when it affects ours. I can do that. Third, whatever happens between us, romantically stays separate from my job. I need to know that if we try this and it doesn't work, I can still support my daughter. That I'm not financially trapped if things go bad. I'll have Moretti draft something formal. Your employment is independent of our relationship. That's non-negotiable for me too, actually. I don't want you staying with me because you're afraid of losing your income. And fourth, I said, you accept that I'm not fragile. I've survived worse than anything you're likely to put me through. I don't need you to shield me from reality. I need you to include me in it. He nodded slowly. I can work with that. All of it. But Amanda, I need one thing from you too. What? If you ever feel unsafe, if your instincts tell you this isn't right anymore, you trust that, and you leave. Even if I think you're wrong. Even if I want you to stay. You listen to yourself first. Deal. We stood there in the quiet of the guest house, holding each other. Both of us knowing we'd just committed to something that might be wonderful or terrible or some complicated combination of both. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was choosing my life instead of just surviving it. So what happens now? I asked eventually. Now I take things slowly, Franco said, pulling back slightly to look at me. I court you properly. Dinners, conversations, time to actually get to know each other without crisis driving every interaction. No rushing, no assumptions about where this leads. That sounds suspiciously healthy. I'm full of surprises. He kissed my forehead gently. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's Friday, which means Beatrice will have questions about why I'm smiling for no apparent reason. You're smiling? I'm smiling. After he left, I checked on Chloe, who was indeed still reading under her covers. She looked up when I opened the door. You and Franco figured things out? She asked. How did you know we were talking? I'm 12, not deaf. The walls aren't that thick. She marked her place in her book. So are we staying? We're staying. If that's okay with you? She thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I think it's okay. He makes you happy. I haven't seen you happy like this in forever. What about you? Are you happy here? Happier than I've been in a long time, she said honestly. I like Mrs. Rinaldi. I like having my own room that's not tiny. I like that you're not working yourself to death anymore. And I like that when scary things happen, there are people who actually do something about it instead of just shrugging. If that ever changes, if you stop being happy here, you tell me immediately. Your well-being matters more than anything else. I know, Mom, but maybe let yourself be happy too. Okay? You deserve it. I hugged her goodnight and went to my own room. Lying in the dark, thinking about all the ways this could go wrong and all the ways it might go right. The logical part of my brain kept listing risks, calculating probabilities, preparing for disaster. But the part of me that had been buried under years of survival mode and fear was quietly hopeful. Maybe I was making a mistake. Maybe in 6 months or a year, I'd regret choosing to stay in Franco's world. But maybe, just maybe, I was finally choosing something real. Something that acknowledged the darkness but reached for light anyway. Something that didn't promise perfection, but offered genuine partnership. I fell asleep thinking about Franco's rare smile, about Beatrice's warm eyes, about Chloe's laughter echoing through the house, about the possibility of building something lasting from very imperfect pieces. 6 months changed everything, and nothing at all. The cartel agreement held. Not perfectly. There were still tensions, disputes over borderline territories, moments when Franco would come home tense and exhausted from negotiations that required careful diplomacy, backed by implicit threats. But the open violence stopped. No more midnight gunfire, no more wounded men bleeding on expensive floors, no more rushing Chloe to underground bunkers. Beatrice declined steadily, her good days becoming rarer jewels in an increasing darkness of confusion. Some afternoons she'd recognize me and tell stories about Naples with perfect clarity, her hands moving expressively as she described the markets and the ocean and her mother's kitchen. Other days she'd call me Lucia, or Maria, or not recognize me at all, frightened by the stranger in her house trying to make her eat lunch. Patricia and I developed a rhythm for handling the bad days. Gentle redirection, familiar music, simple activities that engaged her hands even when her mind wandered. Franco watched his mother disappear incrementally, and I watched him carry that grief with the same controlled discipline he applied to everything else. He never broke down in front of her, saving his moments of raw emotion for late nights when Beatrice was asleep and he could finally let the mask slip. Chloe thrived in ways that still surprised me. The private school Franco had insisted on paying for challenged her academically, and she joined the art club, coming home with paint-stained hands and stories about projects that made her eyes light up. She'd made friends, real friends who came to the house for sleepovers and study sessions. Normal 13-year-old activities that had seemed impossible 6 months ago. She called Franco by his first name now, comfortable in a way that spoke to genuine affection, rather than forced politeness. He'd attend her school events when his schedule allowed, sitting beside me in the audience watching her present science projects or perform in the spring play. To anyone looking, we probably appeared like a regular family. Complicated, blended, but functional. Ryan was still in prison, his sentence extended after the restraining order violation. Vincent Moretti had been ruthlessly efficient in ensuring every charge stuck, every legal avenue for early release closed. I'd stopped checking the countdown to his release date, stopped living in fear of the moment he'd get out again. That particular threat had been neutralized as thoroughly as Franco's world knew how to neutralize threats. My relationship with Franco evolved slowly, deliberately. We'd made a pact that first night to take things at a measured pace, and we'd mostly kept to it. Dinners together after Beatrice went to bed, conversations that ranged from profound to mundane, stolen kisses in quiet moments when Chloe wasn't watching. He courted me, an old-fashioned word for an old-fashioned approach that somehow worked. I'd moved from the guest house into the main house 3 months ago, not into Franco's bedroom, but into a suite on the second floor that gave me space and privacy. We were building something, but we were building it with intention, with recognition that rushing would undermine the foundation we were trying to create. The legitimate side of his business operations expanded. I knew because he'd started including me in conversations about it, showing me the spreadsheets and projections for the shipping company, the real estate holdings, the import business that actually imported legal goods. He was slowly shifting focus, redirecting energy toward ventures that wouldn't require looking over his shoulder constantly. "I want to build something that lasts," he'd told me one evening, both of us reviewing financial documents at his desk. "Something Chloe could inherit without the complications. Something that doesn't require my children to make the same choices I had to make. My children." The casual possessiveness of that statement should have sent up red flags, but instead it settled warm in my chest. He saw a future that included us, not as accessories or temporary fixtures, but as permanent parts of his world. On a Saturday in late May, everything crystallized into a moment I hadn't been expecting. Beatrice was having a particularly difficult day. She'd woken up convinced she was a teenager again, insisting she needed to help her mother prepare dinner for her father, who'd been dead for 50 years. No amount of gentle redirection was working, and her agitation was building toward the kind of episode that would require medication to calm. Franco was in his study handling a crisis with one of the shipping routes, some jurisdictional dispute that required his immediate attention. Chloe was at a friend's house for the afternoon. It was just me, Patricia, and a woman who didn't recognize her own home. "Where is my mother?" Beatrice demanded in Italian, her voice rising. "Why won't you take me to her? What have you done with her?" "Beatrice, your mother isn't here right now," I said gently, keeping my voice calm. "But you're safe. You're home. We're going to take care of you." "This is not my home. My home is in Naples." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Please, I want to go home. I want my mother." Something in her desperation broke my heart. She wasn't a confused elderly woman in that moment. She was a scared child who didn't understand why everything was wrong, why the world had shifted without her permission, why nothing made sense anymore. I pulled her into a hug, holding her while she cried against my shoulder. "I know," I whispered, abandoning the script of redirection and just being present with her grief. "I know you want to go home. I know nothing feels right." She clung to me, sobbing in Italian, and I just held her. Patricia hovered nearby with medication ready if needed, but I shook my head. Sometimes what people needed wasn't pharmaceutical intervention, but human presence. Someone willing to sit in the discomfort with them instead of trying to fix it away. After long minutes, Beatrice's sobs quieted. She pulled back, looking at me with eyes that were clearer than they'd been all day. "You are kind," she said in heavily accented English. "You stay even when it is hard. Franco, he choose well. I care about you," I said. "Both of you. He love you, you know. My son. He does not say it, but I see. He look at you like his father look at me, like you are the answer to question he not know he asking." She touched my face gently. "You love him too, yes?" I did. I'd been avoiding saying it, even thinking it too directly, because love felt dangerous. Love meant vulnerability, commitment, the risk of devastating loss. But sitting there with Beatrice, her lucid moment a gift that might not come again. I couldn't pretend otherwise. Yes, I admitted. I do. Good. Is good. She patted my cheek. He needs someone who not afraid of him. Someone who see the good man under the hard shell. You see this, yes? I see it. Then you tell him. Life is short, Amanda. Shorter than we think. Do not waste time being afraid of happiness. Her clarity faded after that. Confusion returning, but gentler now. She let Patricia guide her upstairs for a nap without protest, exhausted from the emotional storm. I sat alone in the sunroom afterward, thinking about her words. Life is short. Don't waste time being afraid of happiness. Simple advice from a woman whose own life was being stolen piece by a disease that didn't care about her wisdom or warmth or the people who loved her. Franco found me there an hour later. His crisis resolved, he'd come looking for us. He took one look at my face and sat beside me. Bad day? He asked. Hard day. But she had a moment of clarity at the end. I turned to look at him. She told me you love me. His expression shifted, guard dropping in a way I'd learned to recognize. She's perceptive, even when she's confused. Is it true? He didn't answer immediately, weighing his words with characteristic care. When he spoke, his voice was steady. Yes, it's true. I've been trying to give you space to figure out your own feelings without pressure. But yes, Amanda, I love you. I've loved you for months. Probably since you stood in my penthouse and refused my money like it was an insult. That's a weird moment to fall in love with someone. You were the first real thing I'd encountered in years. The first person who saw me as just a man instead of a position, or a threat, or a transaction. How could I not fall in love with that? I thought about all the reasons I should be cautious. About the darkness still present in his life, despite his efforts to move toward legitimacy. About the complications of blending our lives when we came from such different worlds. About whether I was strong enough to be partner to someone whose choices sometimes required moral flexibility I'd never had to exercise. But I also thought about the past 6 months. How he'd never pressured me for more than I was ready to give. How he'd respected every boundary I'd set. How he loved his mother with a gentleness that contradicted every stereotype about men in his position. How he'd welcomed Chloe not as an obligation, but as someone worthy of his time and attention. How he'd helped me find my footing instead of trying to keep me dependent. Your mother told me not to waste time being afraid of happiness, I said. She's wise. She is. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. I love you too, Franco. I've been trying not to for a while, telling myself all the reasons it was complicated or risky or unwise. But I do. I love you. He pulled me against his side, and we sat there in the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, holding each other in comfortable silence. No dramatic declarations, no rushing toward the next milestone. Just acknowledgement of what had been growing between us since that first night when Chloe had given away her lunch money to help a confused old woman in the rain. That evening, Franco gathered all of us in the dining room. Beatrice was having another clear period. Patricia was finishing her shift, and Chloe had returned from her friend's house. He stood at the head of the table looking uncharacteristically nervous. I want to say something to all of you, he began. The past 6 months have been transformative for me. This house has felt like a home instead of just a place I sleep. My mother has had more joy than I've seen in years, and I've found something I didn't know I was missing. He looked at me, then at Chloe. Amanda, Chloe, you've given me a reason to want more than just survival, more than just power and control. You've shown me what it means to build a life instead of just maintaining operations. And I'd like to make this permanent if you're willing. From his pocket he produced a small box. My heart started racing. Franco. This isn't just a proposal to you, Amanda. This is a proposal to all of us. He opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring. I want to marry you. I want to officially become Chloe's stepfather. I want us to be a family, not just people living in the same house. Chloe's eyes went wide. She looked at me, question clear on her face. I looked at Beatrice, who was beaming. At Patricia, who'd become as much family as employee. At Chloe, who'd survived so much and deserved stability. At Franco, who'd somehow become the most steady presence in my chaotic life. There are conditions, I said, and Franco smiled because of course there were. Name them. First, Chloe gets a say in this. She's the other person most affected by this decision. He turned to Chloe. What do you think? Can you handle having me as a stepfather? Chloe bit her lip, but she was smiling. Will you come to my art shows? Everyone. And help me with math homework? Reluctantly, but yes. And promise not to be weird and overbearing like dads in movies. I promise to be exactly the right amount of overbearing. No more, no less. She looked at me, then back at him. Okay then. But if you hurt my mom, I'll figure out how to hurt you back. That's fair. I laughed, not quite believing this was happening. Second condition. I want a prenup that protects both of us, but especially protects Chloe's future. If something happens to me, she has guaranteed access to resources and education. Moretti already drafted it, Franco said. I'll have him revise it to your specifications. And third, I said, we do this at whatever pace feels right. No rushing to the altar because of some deadline. We get engaged. We plan together. We make sure this is what we all want every step of the way. I can work with that. He moved closer. The ring's still in its box. So is that a yes? I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago. Exhausted. Afraid. Barely surviving. I thought about the woman I'd become. Still flawed. Still carrying scars. But stronger for having faced them. I thought about Chloe. Laughing with her friends. Painting in her room. Sleeping through the night without fear. I thought about Beatrice. Declining but surrounded by love. I thought about Franco, who'd proven that power didn't require cruelty, that darkness could choose light. Yes, I said. It's a yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, and Chloe cheered, and Beatrice clapped her hands with childlike delight. Patricia pulled out her phone to take pictures, insisting this moment needed documentation, and I stood there, engaged to a man who ran criminal operations, but came home to read bedtime stories to his mother, thinking about how strange and wonderful life could be when you stopped running and started choosing. 6 months had changed everything. A chance encounter on a rainy November night, a $20 act of kindness from a 12-year-old girl, had led to this. To family. To belonging. To love that acknowledged complexity without being destroyed by it. We were family now, complicated and real, and that was more than I'd ever dared to hope for. The end.